All right. I went ahead and threw back. Hopefully you guys were able to join us back in October. Gosh, I can't believe that was October, where we had our Hyperion Solutions Conference. So this is not the Hyperion Solutions Conference, but it is kind of carrying forward the theme, and really I just used the same PowerPoint template because I took one of our base presentations we shared there, and I'm bringing this back to share with you guys today, where we're going to be talking about EDM best practices in data management and governance. Tracy McMullen with interRel Consulting, and I'm excited to take you through today's content. So quick check, and you guys can see me okay, you can hear my screen, see me okay, and you can hear me. I think that's a yes, but let me know if not. All right, so with that, we'll jump in. So what I'm going to do, again, we've had some best practices month where we talked a little bit about PCM last week. We're talking about EDM this week, and I think we've got data visualization coming up. We're jumping into the details. We did that last week with PCM, so I didn't spend too much time with an overview. I really wanted to get into some of the details of the actual products themselves and some of the best practices whenever you're designing and implementing these solutions. With that said, I will go through a quick introduction and talk about some of the functionality, and then we're going to talk about best practices when it comes to EDM and how to really design your application to support the users to have minimal manual touches and inputs, how to collaborate and provide workflow through our master data changes, talk about automation, and then we'll circle back at the end. So quick note about interRel. We are a 5-time EPM Analytics Partner of the Year. I am proud to say that I've actually architected many of these award-winning solutions. We would love to provide, if you guys have questions, if you need services, whether it's related to strategy, implementation, training, support, we have offerings for all of that. So where we are kind of in a webcast schedule is, again, we're in November month. We've been talking about best practices. We talked about data visualizations coming up next week. I'm excited for demo month. So that's going to be in December, where there's not going to be any slides. I think we're just going to have folks actually jumping into the products and showing you how they work. So really excited to take you through that. So with that, let's jump into the details. So I'm going to take it back a step. So we're talking about enterprise data management, which is different than the data management tool that is kind of the old FDMEE that they brought into the cloud. So EDM, enterprise data management, is kind of the focus today. And what that tool provides is data governance, workflow collaboration to support the maintenance of our dimensions and our hierarchies. So what is a dimension? I'm sure most of you guys come from the EPM world, maybe S-Space, and hopefully you know what a dimension is. If there's anybody new, a dimension is simply kind of a grouping of data and how it should roll up together. So, you know, your period dimension is the super simple dimension, easiest dimension to understand. So that typically has your months rolling up to your quarters up to a year total. So it's just a grouping of data elements in the hierarchies that you typically want to report by, you want to plan by. If you're slicing and dicing data and wanting to drill into lower levels of detail, you'll organize those data elements into a dimension. Now, oftentimes, and it depends where you are in your kind of data governance structure. If you've got DRM, data relationship management, there are many customers who are using that. That was a tool built to centralize dimension hierarchy maintenance. But oftentimes our hierarchies are in our ERP system or maybe a data warehouse. And then what happens is we need to share those hierarchies. We need to share those dimensions across multiple different systems. And then what we also find is sometimes there's different roll-ups depending on the area of the organization. I always find it interesting when FP&A has their roll up and how they want to see things that's different from accounting, in your monthly actuals reporting. But that happens, and so what EDM allows you to do is manage your standard hierarchies that everybody should be reporting on, but you can also have alternate hierarchies, to support the different flavors of the dimensions that we may need in our different applications. So some of the challenges, and this is probably very real for you guys today, significant manual effort, to maintain hierarchies, which then, kind of trickles in like whenever we're needing to close the report, close the books, non-standard reporting. So you have folks coming to meetings with different sets of numbers, right? And that's because you don't have common hierarchies, you don't have standardization across different systems. So flexibility, we're still doing a whole bunch of stuff in Excel. I still do stuff in Excel. We love Excel, but again, there are challenges with Excel-based solutions. Again, we've got a number of different systems, applications that could result in silos of information. We really need to find ways to bring that together. So a lot of real world challenges that go on. And so again, if you kind of, this is, I think I originally created this diagram. It may be 10 years old. It is possible, but that's because it still happens where there's a dimension maintenance nightmare where our account dimension, that's going to come from GL, our people dimension comes from HR, our org dimension might be in our data warehouse. So you end up having arrows going all over the place. And I do think over these last 10 years, you don't find this quite as much. And again, the folks who have used DRM have kind of centralized that process a little bit. But, you still end up with kind of complex processes, manual processes that are different, they're inconsistent. Oftentimes IT's handling it when really it should be in the business user's hands. Limited security, limited checks and balances, whether it's from a business requirement standpoint or from a specific system requirement. And then no visibility into kind of who made what change, the auditability and tracking that. So again, those have been consistent challenges that often take place related to our dimension maintenance, our hierarchy maintenance. Another challenging requirement that we have is when we have multiple chart of accounts. So again, if we're a large enterprise or organization, we've got different business units that are on different ERP systems. They each have their own chart of accounts. How do we maintain the mappings into a standard chart of accounts so that we can report? And so again, that's what EDM supports and facilitates that process of managing the mappings of our chart of accounts or segments across our systems to standard reporting ones. Another kind of challenge and use case that we have for very acquisitive type companies that are buying new companies quite a bit, and then you need to collect their information, consolidate that information up. You don't want to, however long it would take to actually get them on your ERP system, that's going to be a crazy big process. So typically they're going to continue to function as is, but you need a way to get their data and be able to consolidate and report on it. And so we actually have customers who are doing this, that they're actually using EDM to manage the chart of account mappings. So we have this acquisition, they have their chart of accounts, here's how we're going to map it into our chart of accounts. And then you can actually use EDM to actually maintain those mappings. So then you can run it through data management. You can use a OneCloud product if you wanted to use that to get back into your main ERP system, or if you're using FCC or HFM, you can map the data and then you're off and running. So this really facilitates faster consolidation reporting of those acquisitions and mergers that you're doing. Also, corporate restructures. So again, if you're reorganizing the business, realigning, having just a tool to do that and kind of map new departments and what the structures are going to look like, having an enabling technology to support this process would be really helpful. So in comes EDM. So when we talk about best practices in data governance and management, it's overall just using EDM to centralize the maintenance of your dimensions, hierarchies, your attributes. It is and should be used by your business users. Now again, IT of course can be involved as well, but typically this is a business user owned process. And it provides all the user functions. It was designed to support dimension and hierarchy maintenance. That is its sole job in life. So I know I actually had a conversation last week with a customer whose position was, no, we just maintain the hierarchies in PeopleSoft. PeopleSoft is the book of record for hierarchies. We don't need EDM. But the fact is they do need EDM. You could still have PeopleSoft be the source of record for the roll-ups, but what is needed in your planning and forecasting cube, what is needed in strategic modeling, what is needed in some of your reporting cubes, you may have alternate hierarchies. You may have, you 100% have additional system properties that need to be maintained. And there's no way you're going to do all of that activity in your ERP application. So if for those of you who are saying, nope, we've got it in our ERP system, we're good, there is still a use case. And again, your ERP system can feed the main hierarchies in TDM, but then at that point, you can share it out to external applications, whether it's EPM, whether it's Workday. Again, it is an agnostic tool, system agnostic tool. It's purely if you have a requirement to maintain a dimension, a hierarchy, a roll up, EDM is the tool to do that. And it is a best practice to use this solution. Now, what's great about EDM is that it comes with your EPM, well, and I'll say this, there is an asterisk. It comes with the Oracle EPM Cloud enterprise subscription model. So you get 5,000 nodes as part of your monthly subscription. And then if you have additional nodes that you need to maintain, there's an additional cost that's associated with that, but it comes with it. So for you guys that are planning to move to the cloud, migrate to the cloud that are there, or maybe you're already on the cloud and you have PBCS and maybe you have FCCS and you're maintaining those two applications, separately, or you've got some automated process with some dimension files, EDM, once you migrate, convert over to enterprise, using EDM to kind of centralize that process and achieve some best practices is recommended. So again, EDM allows business users to manage the dimensions, the hierarchies, and the data. It provides audit controls and accountability, and you can sync the data across all of your different systems, whether it's Oracle or a non-Oracle solution. You can easily compare hierarchies and see where there are differences. If something's missing, there's some kind of easy user functionality to be able to do that. You can also streamline user maintenance and make things, kind of very automated and as few as touches as possible related to the hierarchies. And that's a lot of what we're going to talk about today is some of the best practices in design for EDM to make that the best user experience. There are approval policies, workflow, notifications, and collaboration that are supported as well. And we're going to talk about that today. So before we jump in, a lot of customers still have not seen EDM yet. So I just wanted to take you through the basics from an end user perspective, just so you can kind of see what it looks like. So this is the home screen, which is a very standard kind of Oracle home screen. They're designing these user interfaces to function much like our phone, right? Where you don't have to have a ton of training. You can kind of click on the card or cluster for the particular task that you want to complete. This is definitely customizable. It also is going to honor security. So the view we're seeing here is from an administrator perspective. If I'm a user perspective, I'm not going to see all of these different icons. How users interact with EDM is through views. So when you are wanting to manage a dimension, there are views that are created automatically within EDM for a particular source or target application. So if you have a planning application that you're wanting to maintain a hierarchy for, you're going to have, my planning application view. You can also, and then that would have all of the dimensions that I want to maintain in EDM. So that planning application view would have account, cost center, entity, potentially product. It just depends which dimensions we want to maintain. I can also create maintenance views that allow me to, let's say I am syncing up my account dimension between EBS and planning and a free-form application. So I can create an account maintenance view that allows me to see what that dimension looks like across all of those different applications. So, and again, you can apply security. So it depends on, what I've been granted access to. I can, navigate directly, work within the planning application, or if I just want to focus on account maintenance, I can do that. And I can view the hierarchies across the different target applications that I'm going to be sending these dimensions to. So once I open up a view, so here we opened up corporate GL. There's a corporate GL EDM application. Within corporate GL, you can see the tabs of the different dimensions. So I have account, and then notice once I'm clicked on account, I can navigate the hierarchy. So I can expand down. You have some different icons, so you know when you're at the bottom of a dimension. And then on the right-hand side, I have all of the different properties. Now there are some views, like if you don't like this view and you want to see the properties down at the bottom, you can switch those as well. And then notice I always like the breadcrumb trail, because sometimes these hierarchies are pretty deep, you know, and your UI kind of runs out of space if you've got a very deep hierarchy. There's a breadcrumb trail, right? So you can see how this particular node that has been selected, 12101, how that rolls up within the organization. There's also a search icon, so you can search for members. And again, you can search for members across applications and viewpoints. So, oh, actually I have a slide on that. So from a search perspective, what I really like, you know, you kind of just start typing, and then as you type, it creates a hyperlist of the different nodes that meet that criteria. And so then if I'm like, I immediately see, oh yes, I need to update customer support, and I see 220, that I can click on the blue 220 and it will immediately jump to that location in the hierarchy. So navigation is really intuitive within the EDM application. Now, even though you don't really have, hopefully, too much of a need for downloading, you can always download a viewpoint or section of a hierarchy into Excel. There are cases where you're going to be wanting to do some mass updates. So you can actually download files into Excel, you know, use your Excel functionality to kind of fill in some properties, and then you can re-upload that file. Users can do that. It's not required as an admin, and it's a really good, really easy feature to use. So admins define how users will interact with the data, and you can customize this. So it just depends. So you can see that there are different actions that can be defined for a particular viewpoint and for a particular dimension. So you can decide whether you want to allow users to add nodes, move, delete, reorder, insert. So depending on your design, let's say my customer's example that was like, nope, hierarchies come from PeopleSoft. So if that's the case, I would want to disable the ability to add new nodes, to insert nodes, to move them or delete them, or remove, right? Now, I may want to let them reorder some nodes, but if truly I don't need alternate hierarchies, it's just the dimension is the dimension that comes from it, I can disable that. So then really all folks can do is update the properties, you know, so then if I have a series of planning properties or FCC properties that need to be maintained, I can say, okay, those are editable, but I'm not going to let them actually change the hierarchy because it's always going to match PeopleSoft. So again, and this can be very specific and custom based on the application, viewpoint, and dimension. So what does it look like from a user when they want to make a change? The way that they've designed EDM is that it's a shopping cart experience. So you do a new request, and then you can start making changes. So when you do a new request, it's going to show up in this left-hand panel, and it's going to kind of keep, just like in Amazon, as I start adding things to my cart, this is my EDM cart of changes. So you can see any changes are going to continue to be added in that box. It automatically assigns a number to me, but I can also give it a much more descriptive description if I want to, which is help from a you know, kind of review, auditability, kind of understanding some of the changes that you've made. As you start to make changes, anything that has changed is going to be highlighted in yellow. And again, you'll see kind of, all right, we've made a series of updates to the node 60, and we can see all those properties that have changed. And then right next to it, you'll see an exclamation point. So there's an issue with one. So again, EDM is doing that check for me. So I can continue to make changes. Now, how I can interact with these properties, sometimes it's drop-down box because I'm limiting what users can pick from. Sometimes it's a free form box that users can enter. So you can kind of control, you know, what users can choose as they set those properties. So as you continue to make requests, you can see the shopping cart fills up. So node 60 was updated, node 70 was updated, node 40 was updated. And actually you can see the green, these were new nodes that were inserted in. So again, you kind of get some coloring clues along the way to kind of understand the changes. And then at any point, once your shopping cart gets really big, if you wanted to jump back and see what those changes are, they're all hyperlinks. So you can just select, the link here for 70 line of business, and then it's going to jump to that node in the hierarchy and then show you the properties. And again, I can toggle these properties on and off, but you can see what the updates were made. Notice here too, my one issue, there's something going on with this 40, remember, because that's tagged red. So once I go to submit, I would get an error message that would give us, what that error is. So if you need to, you can insert in children. So you can insert nodes, you can move nodes, copy and delete. It's kind of right. You can click on the ellipsis action and be able to access all the different actions, assuming that the admin has granted me the capability to do so. So this was the feature that I mentioned, that if you wanted to, you could actually download, a certain section of the hierarchy, make a series of changes, and then re-upload it in the form of a load request. So that's great, because sometimes it actually is going to be faster for you to update many properties for many nodes, in Excel, where you can kind of click and drag and fill in some items. You can then upload that property, and then EDM will process that just like you manually changed it in the web UI. So it can really accelerate the update process. Now, one thing about the file is the headers must match the column headers exactly. But if you've downloaded the hierarchy, which you likely did, it's already going to have those correct column headers. So all you have to do is re-import in that same file. So I mentioned, sometimes we have this invalidation, we have these validation checks that are going on. So again, before I can even submit and make this change, you can see, hey, this name already exists, right? We've chosen we're not going to allow duplicates. So you can see and jump to where these nodes exist in the hierarchy, and then you can fix those. So again, lots of features, kind of keeping track of what changes have been proposed with hyperlinks to them. You can view any error messages. You can add commentary. If you add commentary, you can tag other users, and then they'll get some notifications. You can view and add attachments as well. View property locations. So again, this is helpful. So again, you can see the properties, but then I mentioned there's kind of that breadcrumb tree down below. You can also see it here, where you can kind of understand where do these nodes exist within the hierarchy. And then you can also see the history. So you understand who has updated what, when was it updated. You can see this for each node. And then you can also see history based on all of the previous requests. So when it comes to that transparency, the auditability, you can see either in the hierarchy itself when you're within a view and looking at those nodes, and then when you're here in the main screen, you can jump to previous requests and look for any requests. Notice that there's a lot of filtering capabilities here. So if you're looking for a particular user, a particular request type, you can view and search and filter for some of that information. Once you click on a view request, you can actually see the details. So you get some summary information that was provided. And then if you click on the details, you can see what was changed. So we added a node type product. We inserted in P110. We updated the property. We updated the hierarchy type to be stored. So you can actually view the details. So you can see P12, P120, and then what changes were added for those node requests. So hopefully that makes sense. And just being able to, one, as changes are made, they're tracked, and then you can view it. Now, if you've enabled collaboration workflow policies, you can actually see where it is in the process, who submitted it, who approved it, and then its current state. So if it's been finalized and submitted, you can see the workflow process as well. And again, when it comes to, and we'll talk about this a little bit later on in the webcast, you don't have to use approvals in workflow. It kind of depends on your requirements and who are the users that are updating these different hierarchies. What may happen is if you're first implementing EDM and you're really just using EDM maybe with Planning Cloud or Freeform application, that it's really a little bit more kind of centralized, not as many applications that you're syncing data across, you might not need approvals in your first phase and collaboration. So it's always something you could add in later, and that's not a problem to do so. It may be something that you decide, no, I want to go ahead and have this set up. We've got the process in place so that as we add on new applications, we've got the workflow and collaborations defined. So again, you can view the previous, this is again looking at some of the details related to the history. So that's following kind of that approval process. So you can, again, for these request histories, you can see the summary, the details, the comments, attachments, the workflow process where it's at, and then kind of the history of all of the different changes and who approved what and when and what changed. There's also a very detailed audit trail that is available as well, kind of for searching and filtering based on changes. So visibility, transparency into the data governance process. You've got structure. Once things have been through the process, and it's been approved, then the change gets submitted. Any subscribing applications will accept those changes, and then at that point you're then ready to push to those external applications. So you push to once you've submitted a change, approved a change in an EDM, it doesn't actually have just an immediate update and a target system. So usually what happens, because a lot of times you're wanting to control that process and you want to do that on a nightly basis or at scheduled times during the day so that you can kind of control how those applications are being updated. So the most common is nightly updates. But again, during the close process, that may not be possible. So you can also run these things on demand. Just know as you make these changes in EDM, it's committed, it's saved, it's approved in EDM, and then there's a next step that can be fully automated that actually pushes it, to your ERP system, that pushes it to your freeform application, your Essbase Cube. There's a separate step that does that. All right, so one thing, so we're talking about best practices, and so what you've just made the decision, we're going to use EDM to manage our main hierarchies and dimensions. And part of the design that you're going to want to do is designing the properties to support those target applications. And then we want to design it in a way that it is the easiest, fastest process for our users. So when it comes to properties in EDM, this is when we have our hierarchy, right? So we have our accounts, that roll up to the different account strings up to reporting lines. So we have those, but in addition to just the hierarchy and how things roll up, there's a series of properties. So EDM provides many properties just out of the box that you can take advantage of. It has connected applications for Planning Cloud, Financials Cloud, EBS, and FCC. So that means if you want to set up an FCC EDM application, you create that as a connected application, and it's already got some intelligence because it knows these are all the properties you're going to need to maintain for FCC. Same thing for planning, same thing for EBS or Financials Cloud. So then that way you've got this built-in intelligence. For any applications, target or source applications for your dimensions that there's not a connected application, you can create what's called a universal application, sort of like your universal remote, where it's okay. So that's where, again, EDM you can use for any target, any source. It's system agnostic. In that case, if it's a universal application, you can pick and choose from existing properties that EDM has already defined, or you can create your own. So you can create your own properties with the own logic and business validations and system validations. You can create that within EDM. So for universal applications, again, if you do a connected application, it's going to add in the properties for you, and you don't have another step that's needed to define the properties within that application. For universal, you're going to have to pick and choose. So you're going to say, okay, I've got this new application. Let's say we're wanting to update PCM, right? So there's not yet a connected application for PCM, although this does change rapidly, and it is hard for me to keep up with everything. So I don't think PCM is out yet. It might be, and I know it's on the roadmap somewhere, but I'm going to use the example PCM in case that's not out. So I would create I'm going to do an EDM target application for PCM. And then I would go in and I would say, okay, I need to add in the properties. What do I want to maintain for the PCM dimensions? So I would pick a name, parent, description. For PCM, I'm probably going to pick properties like data storage. I'm going to pick properties like consolidation type. And again, a lot of those properties already exist. So I can just select from an existing one. If I don't have a property, I can just click create. So I'm off and running, and I can create their property and kind of put the constraints around the property. What are the valid values? What's the minimum length, the maximum length? Is it a required property? I get to kind of control all of that to really make sure that we've got integrity within the hierarchies that we're maintaining within EDM. We're error proofing, users so they can't mess up, right? So, you've got that kind of safety net in EDM that's going to prevent users from making a mistake. You can define that within the property definitions. Now, again, if you've got a connected app or an out-of-the-box application, those you can pick and choose and add those in, but you can also add some specific properties if you want to. Sometimes you want to be able to understand kind of member counts, some other different attributes. So you can use the properties that come with it. And again, there's a lot of helpful kind of informational properties that you may need to use in some of your logic and some of your derived properties. On that note, let's talk about derived properties. So you guys saw the UI. And again, if you think about all the properties that have to be maintained for your planning application, your SBase, your FCC, your ERP, your, all the other applications, your HCM, your your workforce solutions, your capital solutions, there's a lot of properties, a lot of dimensions. So we want to make things as automated as possible. And how you do that is you can use default properties, and then you can also use derived properties. So default properties is basically the property that's going to automatically be populated when a user creates a new node. You can define, now you may say we're not going to have any default, so it's going to be blank until the user defines it. You can have a default property be specified, or you can have it be derived. So as an example, let's say I've got my product dimension that I'm maintaining, and one of those properties in the product dimension is consolidation tag. Well, for the most part in product dimension, everything's a plus. Like, we're just going to aggregate our SKUs up to our product categories, product families, et cetera, and everything's a plus. So I may want to set the default property to a plus sign, right? So it's going to be specified. I'm going to say, yep, the default, it's a specified, and then here's what the default value is. You can also let users pick from an allow values list so that they can kind of pick and choose. And then again, you can also set things to be derived. I'm going to talk about that in just a little bit. So for example, we'll talk about derived properties, but if we wanted to the alias or the description to always be the name plus a description, that's what our alias is going to be. You can set that to be derived. So it automatically populates for users. And then what's great about these default properties, whether it's specified or derived, is users can override it. So they can go in, and if it's something that's different, they have the ability to change it, and you can control it. The other thing that you can set is inheritance. So then that way you only have to define it, at an upper level member of your, let's say if it's that plus for product. And let's say I didn't want it to default to plus, but I want to default to kind of wherever it's set at the highest parent. So you can set plus at your product family level, and then as long as I don't go in and change a specific SKU below, everything's going to be inherited down. So the users have to only go at one point, and then it's going to be inherited throughout the process. So inheritance is another way to really, and you definitely want to set this where it makes sense, where you can, because it saves a lot of user entry time. And then that way, if you update one, it kind of flows through the rest of the hierarchy. Inheritance can be overwritten as well. So again, it just is setting those properties, setting that information so users don't have to click it, but then they can override it if they need to. Now, I mentioned derived properties, right? So there's a lot of use cases for derived properties. to facilitate users not having to manually input in items. The other thing is a lot of times we've got some logic, if we talk about the EPM world, and let's say we're taking advantage of hybrid. And so in a hybrid world, what we want to do is our level 0 members should be stored, but then all of the upper level members we want to be dynamic. So I can actually automate the maintenance of that property in EDM using the expression builder. So expression builder is used in derived properties, custom validations, subscriptions, policies, node type converters. This is kind of your way to build in logic. What's great is it's not scripting. It's kind of a wizard driven like GUI interface to define your logic. So you kind of see, you would pick the arrow and you would say, okay, I'm gonna start with an if statement. So if my node name, and I'm kind of stepping through 1, 2, 3, right? So if my node name starts with, and then I can pick these functions, and it kind of just, based on whatever your prior selection was, it gives you what your next available, kind of parameter will be. So if it starts with 1, then I want to return asset. So if I've got a property that, again, we've got some intelligence built into our account numbering, but I've got another target system that is not looking for a 1, it's looking for a property that basically identifies the account as like an asset, liability, etc. So I can actually use EDM to populate that property, and we've got an expression builder that I kind of just pick. And so I have a derived property that kind of can run through this logic that will evaluate the node name, and if it starts with a 1, then it's going to populate this property for me, and I don't have to change anything. So again, this expression builder and kind of walking through the steps we're going to use in derived properties. I'll show you a few more examples, but you can also use, you're going to see this expression builder in validations, and you can use it really throughout EDM. So again, creating derived properties, so kind of back to our properties, and using that expression builder to kind of click and drag. The expression builder, I think, was introduced, gosh, I think around a year, maybe. I don't know, because this year has been crazy. Yeah, let's see. So I think October 2019, that is insane. So it's been around a while, and they've done some pretty significant updates and enhancements. And it's really exciting because we can automate a lot of stuff using this. But here's an example where we're doing a check, just trying to identify, is this a set of property that's true or false on whether it's a bottom node or it's an upper level member. Because sometimes we need to set that true or false, and then we use that logic somewhere else, or sometimes another system needs to know that information. So this is kind of, if you see and kind of look, it's a little bit hard with the screenshot, but you're saying if the node property bottom node is equal, if it's, equals to true. So if it's if the bottom node is true, then I want to return false, because it would be a summary member. It would not be a summary member, else true, which means it would be an upper level. You can also kind of flip-flop it, right? So like for your ERP systems, you only want to allow posting on the level 0 nodes. So again, we can define logic so that it goes ahead and evaluates. EDM's intelligent enough to understand, is this a bottom node or not? And then I'm going to set my true or false based on that. So that's a common derived property. We can also derive aliases. So this was the example that I mentioned where, again, we want the alias to automatically populate based on the name and the description. So if you look at the expression builder, you kind of have to look, we just want to return. So again, there's a kind of a user process where I click return the property core name, and then I want to concatenate that with a space dash space, and then core description, and then you're done. And then it automatically populates that alias for you. And then again, notice you may have another alias table where you only want the description. So you can have that as well. And then what's important and really helpful is, right, our EDM or our EPM applications don't like duplicate aliases. So we can build in validations to make sure we don't have the duplications of member names and aliases. So you address that here in EDM and not, find an error or an issue whenever you move over into the EPM world. You can also create custom validations with the expression builder. So when you go into defining a custom validation, you can, enable or disable it. You can define what are the trigger actions that are going to check and actually run the validation process. So here, if there's an addition, an insert, or a rename, I want to actually do this check. And so here's an example where store names have to be 5 characters in length. Please correct. Now, what I would say is we can also control, in this particular use case, I can also define that in the property itself. If it's a custom property, I can say the minimum is 5, the maximum is 5. So I would, in some cases, you can build in some of these validations and the rules about the data into the properties themselves. But let's say it's an out-of-the-box property that you want to go ahead and use, but you want to layer in this validation on top of it. Then that's where this makes sense. Okay, so the trigger property is name, and I want to do a check. And I notice I've put in my failure message. Store names must be 5 characters in length. Please correct. So I've created the validation. So then what you want to do is then define the logic, right? So I'm using that same expression builder. And so I'm basically going through, and this is teeny tiny. Hopefully you guys can zoom. Actually, I'm looking on mine. I have a pretty big monitor on the side, so it may be all right. But essentially you're saying if node properties, so if it's a bottom node, right? If node properties bottom node is equal to true. So if it's a bottom node, this is where I care about it. And the node name matches, and then this is kind of the syntax to check that, that it's a number. Then we want to check if the length is greater than 5, then false, which is going to throw the error message. Else, and there really it's no else, it's just kind of a layered in if statement, and you just kind of go back. Well, the else is over on the other side, right? Else is true, else is true, else is true. So else, if it's less than 5, I want to throw the message false, right? Else, true, and you can skip that message. So again, the kind of capturing the screens look a little wonky here, but again, it's just defining that logic, which is pretty easy to do. So that when a user, lost my mouse, when a user then goes in and they try to add in a new node that's got 6 characters, 3 characters, they get an error message and the users can't change. They get a stop message before they even leave the process. So really, so part of your design and kind of hitting on some details is you want to create this user experience where they have as few touch points as possible. You can automate the population of those properties using the expression builder so that it's automatically populated based on logic and design, and users have to go in, and in this case, this is a real life example where they only have to enter in the name and the description, right? And everything else. And if they wanted like a start date and an end date, we could define default properties for those, but it automatically can identify based on where I inserted in this new node. Is it a summary node? I defaulted the values to Y for enabled and allow budgeting. So by default, I set it Y. So, if 90% of the time these are Ys, they don't have to make a change, right? It's automatically going to be set for them. And then again, we can populate summary and posting based on where it exists in the hierarchy. So hopefully that makes sense. And again, best practice, 1, we're using EDM for our hierarchy maintenance. 2, we want to design these applications to be fast for the users, automate where we can, and make sure we're ensuring data integrity, preventing data issues. So the next kind of best practice in data governance is accomplishing and supporting workflow and approval requirements, right? Because these are hierarchies. This is data that you guys are reporting to the street, you're using to make decisions, based on kind of how this data rolls up. You've got data in, many different systems, and then you're kind of rolling things up based on these standard hierarchies and these common hierarchies. So to really make sure you have integrity in the process, then you want to use and build in collaboration and workflow to support it. So from a high level overview standpoint, a user is going to make a request in EDM. I showed you guys that screen, so they can do a request. And then if you've defined an approval policy, the request will go through that approval process. So you can set up the process, the approval, to either be serial or parallel. So let's say you have, 2 approvers, and you can send it both to them at the same time. You just need to get both of their yeses that I can do that. Or you know, I've got Tracy and I want to send it to Glenn, and then Glenn wants to send it to Sarah. And so that would be a serial approval process. So EDM supports both. It also has different escalation options. We'll see it in just a little bit in case somebody's out of town, and or it's got reminders. And if you haven't responded by a certain time, you get reminders. You can set alternate folks for approval. So there's some great tools within EDM that really can stop any roadblocks or waiting that might take place. So once it's gone through the process and the change is committed and saved, a notification is sent out to users if you've defined a notification policy. Also, you can define subscriptions. If subscriptions allow you to, and we'll talk about this when we talk about some of the EDM application design. I've got an application that we have tagged as kind of the source master application, and then these other applications are going to receive any changes. So you can actually, through the process, send out notifications when those subscriptions go through. If it didn't go through, if there were errors, you can get that information. So again, and as we mentioned, within EDM, as we make these changes, as things are committed, they're saved, and we've notified, it actually hasn't pushed out yet to your FCC, your EBS. There's usually a nightly or on-demand kind of automation push that would then push it into the external systems. So let's look in a little bit more detail on each one of these features. The collaboration feature allows multiple users to collaborate within a single request. So one user makes the request, and then again, you'll kind of define the security who all can be involved. But then at that point, whoever's been assigned, the user picks, okay, I want to collaborate with, you know, Glenn and Sarah on this particular request. I can use the @ sign to tag them. They're going to receive an error message like, oh, I've got something to do. And then they can all go through the process. They can update properties. So Glenn only, maybe I am not the Hyperion admin, Glenn is, and he knows, I don't even know what consolidation tag means. So Glenn, hey, can you update this property? Glenn can update it, and I'm all in the same process. So it's sort of like the Google Docs, if anybody has used that, of EDM, where you can have multiple people working on a request and before it's committed. So once it's requested, then the user who made the initial request can then click submit. At that point. And then you have the history, you see the collaboration, you see who updated what properties, all that's going to be available. So then the user clicks submit. Now, what happens next depends. So if you've turned on approvals and there's an approval policy, then it's going to go through the approval process. If you've not enabled an approval policy, then it's saved, and then the request is done. So there are two different types of policies. There's the approval policy and approval process. So somebody has to approve and say yes in order for the change to be saved within EDM officially as part of the main hierarchy. And then you can also have notifications. Now you can set these policies at an application level, a dimension level, at a hierarchy set. So, you know, if the hierarchy changes, you can set it there, or you can set these policies for properties. So the node type is kind of the properties level. So it can be very complex. It can be very simple. It is a kind of a cascading policy process. So if you set a policy at an application level, that policy applies for all the dimensions, all the hierarchies, all the properties. Versus if you may have different approval processes for your account dimension and entity that maybe you have for product. So this allows you to be either kind of very general and apply the same rules to everybody, or you can be very specific. By default, this is disabled, so it doesn't use it by default, but you can enable and configure them. So the approval policies, and this just shows you some of the options when you're defining an approval policy, for an application dimension, hierarchy, set, or node type. So you can enable it or disable it. You can allow for serial approvals or parallel. So, does it have to go in a sequential order? You also can choose an option to say one approval per group. So if you may have a group of people that are defined, but you don't need every single person to say yes, you just need one person from the group to say yes, so you can set that to true. Include submitter. So in some cases, if I create a request, I'm also the approver, and I don't need to get a second opinion, so I can make the request. I click, submit. Because I'm an approver, it goes ahead and says, okay, yeah, this is approved because you've been set up as an approver. However, if you always want someone else besides the submitter to have an eye on the change, then what you would do is you would set that to false, so that even though I'm an approver in the group, because I created the request, it has to get routed to somebody else, and somebody else say yes. So it just depends, on your requirements or for your business and who's managing what. I can set up notifications, reminder notifications. So like if they, every day they're going to get a reminder if they haven't, whoever the next step in the approval process has not, performed their step to say, review and say yay or nay on the submission for the request. And then you can also set the approval escalation. So how many, I think it's how many days before it gets escalated to the data manager. So there's a data manager level, and at that point, data manager can review and make those changes. So again, notification policies, we can enable them to, turn on, notification policies. So that was approval policies, which can be turned on and off. Notification policies are a little bit more simpler because I don't need to define kind of all those options about approvals. It's just we turn those on and off that we want to allow notifications. And then once we say, yes, we're going to enable them, we just define the users that should get notified when changes are made. So both approvals and notification policies, can apply for everything, or they can be very narrow, and they can be based on the action that is being performed. So and this is a pretty recent feature. So for example, let's say I'm on the ERP team, and I really only want to be notified if somebody, adds, deletes, inserts in, or removes a node. If somebody renames something, I'm going to let the process go through, and I don't need to be notified by that. So you can kind of pick and choose, because sometimes if somebody's updating descriptions and, I don't really need to be notified. I don't care about that. I just want to know if there's something major that's changing that could impact, my system or my kind of the logic that I've built in. So here's sort of what that looks like from a workflow perspective. So you have kind of the primary user that makes the request. So they've said, hey, I've got these new nodes, here's some new properties, I've made changes, I've moved stuff around. I've potentially maybe collaborated with some other folks. So I added Glenn, and he also updated the S-based properties, for this change. So we're all set there. Now I'm going to send it to, my first approver. And again, you can set it by user or group. And here in this example, it's a serial approval process. So I've got group one, somebody approves or rejects it. I'm going to assume that they approve it. If they reject it, it goes back to the submitter. The submitter can make any changes and then have it route back for approval through the process. If the group one approves, it goes to group two, they approve, group four approves. At any point, if it's rejected, it kind of goes back through the process. So then it's been approved. At that point, if we've turned on subscriptions, the subscriptions, subscribing applications will flow through and be updated. And then again, I've got my nightly process that then pushes it to FCC, my ERP, Planning Cloud, or other target system. So with that, there's a couple of other just kind of helpful tools, new features to be aware about, that again, you can take advantage of to facilitate those derived properties to facilitate and support end users. So lookup sets is one. So if you've got just kind of a set of reference data, here we've got an example of like departments and then what their taxing entity is, because maybe I need to use that in some logic that I'm setting, to define, for potentially our workforce application or some other reporting involving tax calculations. So you can define lookup sets that this is kind of like just a table of reference data that then I can use a derived property. I can use that expression builder to say, okay, if the, I know the department, that's what's been defined as part of the node. Based on that, I want to look up the taxing entity. Based on that tax, then I'm going to set this property to ABC. So again, just know this feature is available to help kind of define some simple mappings. You can also change the appearance. So right now there's more options in EPM Cloud Framework than there is in EDM, but you can change it from dark blue to light blue. You can add your logo. There's also the number, when EDM first came out, there were very little reporting. It was great UI, but not a whole lot of reports. And so now we can run reports on the approvals, kind of the approval process across these different views and viewpoints and applications. We can run reports on the subscription. So we can understand kind of how the data as it goes through, who can update what, when, where, and how subscribing applications are receiving those changes. So this is helpful for audit capability. So when you get, the question, how is all of this done and updated, there's reports available for you to use. There's also, I mentioned this, there's an alternate assignee that you can use for a subscription, so that if for somebody is out of office, it can get routed to an additional person. You can also set whether you're going to be out of office in the user preferences. So it's maybe hard to remember if you're going on vacation, but when you set your out of office on for your email, you just remember to do that for EDM as well. So the last kind of best practice, and we're close on time. I apologize, we try and cram all this in. Last topic that we wanted to talk about related to EDM best practices is the topic of mastering. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to kind of show you kind of a diagram that, and I think I've got another screen I like kind of illustrating this concept. Many times you want to try and just make a change once and then have it flow through to all of your target systems. So EDM supports mastering, and what you can do is just pick an application. So in some cases, it might be your ERP application. I'm going to tag that as master, so that anytime, a hierarchy change is made, anytime new nodes are inserted, I'm always going to receive those changes. You can also create a universal master or primary application. So then users update universal, and then all of your subscribing applications will receive those changes. In some cases, you may want to have your master application, maybe you've tagged as your ERP application, but in planning, you've got these alternate hierarchies. Well, that's okay. You can set up planning to subscribe to the main hierarchy, but then within the planning application, you can maintain FP&A's alternate hierarchies. So there's a lot of ways to design it, but you're definitely going to want to likely use some level of subscriptions within EDM to support that process. Again, we're talking about, reducing the manual steps, the manual clicks and touch points. So some of the considerations, on where you're going to use this is how many targets, how many sources and targets that you have, right? And not just what you have today, where are you going the next, 12 months, 24 months, just kind of understanding, because what that's going to look like eventually helps you want to set up EDM to be kind of as fast and flexible at the beginning. So kind of understanding each one of those sources and targets, how are the updates going to occur? So like if I have a subscription, I can turn on auto submit, so that, let's say it's that ERP is the master, we tag that master, planning, always receive the changes. Do I want it to go through an approval? So like it gets routed to the planning administrator has to say yes before it actually makes the change in the planning EDM app, or do I want it to automatically submit? So as soon as, as soon as there's a change there, I want that to automatically flow through. I don't need to look, at new nodes that are inserted. It should just flow through. It just depends. So, and again, it depends kind of on the hierarchies and the changes that are being made. So you'll define how you want to use that. How does the master application receive updates? So whatever you tag as the master application, is that the source? So this is in the design. EDM is a source. I create everything in EDM, and then I push it to ERP, I push it to planning, I push it to FCC. Or am I that scenario where nope, ERP is the place for the main hierarchy, that's going to feed master, and then master is where I maintain all of my other properties. So you kind of just, you need to think through and evaluate the pros and cons of those different approaches. And again, any application can be tagged as the master application, and you can have multiple subscriptions going on. So usually what I have seen in design, it's either like a universal application or it's ERP. It's possible, but it's possible you could have a reporting application that you've tagged that as master. So there's really no right or wrong answer, just kind of figuring out for your requirements what makes sense. You also want to understand who are the users, and when I say users, who are the people that are maintaining the target and source applications, the dimensions and the properties, right? Do you have just one group, that's in charge of all metadata that's updating it for everyone? Then that's going to help you kind of understand, how you want to design it to be as efficient as possible versus is it a little bit distributed where main, hierarchy points are here, but then I've got a planning admin that only cares about his planning app. I've got an FCC admin, only cares about his application, reporting they're very segregated. They just care about theirs. Then you may want to use subscribing for the main hierarchy itself, but then they can each maintain their own set of properties. So there's no right or wrong. It's just, do you want it fully mastered or do you want it distributed? I don't think distributed is when I've got my application and I don't really need to, I don't need to really have any interaction with any other application. I think that's, kind of somewhat defeats the purpose of EDM because then at that point, just maintain the hierarchy in the actual target system. You still get some benefits, right, though, in a distributed environment. So even if you've got this application that I don't want to, I don't want to get hierarchies from anywhere else. I'm not pushing my data anywhere else other than this one application. The benefits of still using EDM is all of that user functionality, the auditing, the history, because your target application is going to be designed and built to do whatever the target business process is. It's not meant to maintain hierarchies. So even in a distributed world, EDM still makes sense. It still provides value. Fully central mastered. I know folks want to do that. They want to have one hierarchy, one place, but like in reality, these EPM applications, these target systems, there can be just slight nuances that prevent you from being 100% mastered. So usually it's somewhere in the middle, right? So you've got kind of main hierarchies, standard hierarchies, but then each one of my systems have their own set of properties. Each one of these target applications may have their own roll-ups. I may have different administrators. So what's great about EDM is, wherever you are in the scale and you may have, and then you could actually be all of the above. You may have a couple of applications that are 100% mastered. You've got some that are, in the middle, and then you may have this one application over here. So like if you're doing a reorg, for example, and you're not really pushing to any other, but you kind of have this other application where we're doing a reorg process, that would be a distributed, could be its own standalone application. So EDM supports the full gamut of requirements that you would have. I'm going to just go ahead and kind of skip because I know we're 2 minutes over. Just know that everything can be automated from a lights out perspective. So these updates, importing, exporting, pulling from systems, everything can be updated. So I've got some slides here that will be available, different ways of automating. EPM Automate is the primary automation tool. There's also REST APIs. So with that, is EDM ready? Yes. We were one of the early implementers, and there were a few hiccups in those early versions, but it is amazing what the product management team has done. So this is a really powerful tool. Don't discount it. It should definitely be part of your roadmap. So with that, I'm going to, let's see if we have any quick questions, and I can stay to address these. All right, so are all on-prem and cloud products supported? Are any missing? So yes, everything is supported in EDM because EDM is system agnostic. Now, there are connected apps, which means EDM's kind of got, they've defined the properties and they understand, for FCC, these are the properties that are needed for the dimensions. So there are connected applications for FCC planning, FCC planning cloud, EBS, and Financials Cloud or Fusion Cloud, Cloud ERP. I feel like they've called it, Oracle has called their Cloud ERP 3 different names. So those are the connected apps. But like if you have an on-premise based application, you can set up EDM to support it, right? It really is kind of system agnostic. We use batch scripts to have one button to press to execute end-to-end in DRM. And SAP is a source for hierarchy. So we, have the SAP file, blend to master, export it out. So is there something like this in EDM? Yes. So you can achieve a DRM-like process, the things you guys are doing in DRM. There was a period of time where there was some parity, but I think we're past that. I think everything we do in DRM, there's a few things that are just different. It's a little bit different data model, but the things that you guys are doing, in DRM today, I would say 97% of them were good, and you can accomplish the same thing in EDM. Is ODI gone from 11.2 an EPM cloud? Does EDM have anything that will directly refresh hierarchies and SBase and planning? So when you move to the cloud, data management is kind of that ODI replacement. It is that FDME replacement. So, and really data management is FDME, and really FDME was basically on top, right? It used ODI. What's great about data management is it's got direct connectors into SQL databases, into your cloud applications. So in many cases, you're going to pair EDM with data management. When it comes to refreshing hierarchies, yeah, EDM, what EDM does when you want to refresh your planning, your FCC application, it takes the export, it's got the exact right columns, and then you set up an automated process that imports it directly into Planning Cloud. If you're talking about SBase, again, you can set out an automation process, either using EPM Automate, combined with your Maxell. You've got a batch script that runs, you export out that hierarchy in a flat file, just like you're doing today in on-prem, and then you've got your script that then uses your rules file and imports it into your SBase cube. So in some cases, there are direct connect apps. In some cases, you just set up your automation script to kind of do your step 1, 2, 3 to get it synced. If I want to have user A approve change 1 and user B approve change 2, how can I do that? So I know you could definitely kind of collaborate and do the tagging to notify and have them work on their different pieces. One way may be to kind of just have security on different pieces. I think there is a way to do that, but it may be that you just have in your commentary, so-and-so needs to approve this change, so-and-so needs to approve this change. And then, it can go through the process and they can review just the pieces that they need to do. I will double check with our consultants to see if there's a specific level that you can define. I want to say that there's, not a way to in the approval process, because we don't know what changes are coming. I don't think there's a way to really nail it down that detailed, unless it was, this person, is going to approve my SBase property changes. This person approves the hierarchy changes. So there's some of that we can define. And again, what you'd probably do is just set them up at your different approval levels. And then, with some commentary and or notes, you can define, hey, don't worry about these changes. I need you to approve this one. Is there any built-in capability to migrate DRM to EDM? So there is a utility that will help you move over DRM. What I would encourage you guys to do though is and we were recommending this really with a lot of the planning cloud migrations, is take a little bit of a step back to see, do we want to redesign, or are there some new ways we can improve the process? Because again, it is kind of a different model. There are a few different things that you would want to do. So while there is utility, my recommendation, and there's definitely processes, right, to move the hierarchies over, import and export the hierarchies and set those. But when you're designing EDM, and or any cloud, my recommendation is don't just move over the old, because you likely implemented DRM 5 years ago, maybe longer. And again, EDM is a different data model. So yes, but I don't know that I would recommend you using that entirely. In what case is it better to use SOA instead of EDM? So I think it's just two different concepts there. So EDM is your business users, making changes, and it's a pre-built application. It's a cloud subscription that is solely designed to manage hierarchies and maintenance, where I think your SOA is just not entirely apples and oranges, but just has a, kind of a different perspective, different place. And again, those things could maybe even work together. So with that, I think we will conclude. I apologize, we are 10 minutes over. I hope everyone has a wonderful day. If you guys have any other questions, please email us at info@interrel.com. Thank you so much. Have a good day.